My name is Lydia Harrow, 43 Senior Operations Manager at Barton Logistics. I've been called dependable, precise, unshakable words people use when they like how calm you stay while everything burns around you. This morning, the fire had a name, Lowry Steele, our biggest client. Their procurement director was shouting through the speaker, his voice echoing off the glass walls. If those titanium frames don't leave the port by tonight, we'll pull every order for next quarter. Across the table, Thomas Avery, my boss, fumbled with his tie. His daughter, Sienna, 3 months into the company and somehow already promoted to director of operations, sat frozen beside him, eyes darting between spreadsheets she didn't understand. "Lydia," Thomas barked. "Fix this." I met his stare, calm, steady. The same tone I'd used for 5 years solving his problems before he decided I wasn't executive material. "No," I said. He blinked. "What did you just say?" I opened the leather folder in front of me, pulled out the single sheet inside, and slid it across the polished mahogany table. The company's logo shimmered in the corner. My resignation letter. For a second, there was silence, just the hum of the projector and the faint hiss of the HVAC. Then Thomas's face turned red. "Is this a joke? Now, during a client crisis." "Timing matters," I said. "You'll handle this one without me." On the screen, the Lowry Steele representative leaned forward, confused. "Is everything all right over there?" Sienna's voice broke, trembling. "Dad." Thomas slammed his palm on the table. "You can't walk away now." "Lydia, we need you." The phones were already ringing in the outer office. Alarms, logistics updates, people calling my name. But I stood, smoothed my blazer, and pushed my chair back into place. "You made sure you didn't." As I reached for the door, the sound of his voice cracked behind me, anger, disbelief, fear, all tangled together. I didn't turn around. Outside, the hallway smelled of old coffee and printer toner. The noise of the conference room faded as I walked toward my office, the place where, 12 days earlier, everything had started to unravel. 12 days earlier, my life looked perfectly ordinary. Every morning, I drove across the Arthur Ravenel Bridge as the sun broke over the harbor, Charleston glowing in soft orange light. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it always reminded me how much time I'd lost learning to survive instead of live. 5 years ago, I walked into Barton Logistics for the first time newly divorced, exhausted, clutching a folder of references that no longer seemed to matter. My ex-husband had remarried a woman who baked pies and posted about fresh starts. I had Noah, 16 and skeptical, asking if we'd be okay. I told him yes because mothers are supposed to sound sure. Back then, Barton's regional division was chaos, missed shipments, unpaid vendors, 2 managers who hadn't spoken in months, files stacked knee-high, drivers quitting mid-week, invoices lost in paper storms. I wasn't hired to fix it. Not really. They just needed someone steady to take the blame if it collapsed. I stayed late the first night, retyping delivery schedules, sorting vendor lists, flagging every missing payment. The fluorescent lights hummed above me like a heartbeat. By midnight, I'd mapped out every weak point in the chain. By the end of that quarter, our region was breaking records. For 5 years, I kept that rhythm. 4 a.m. alarms, coffee that tasted like metal, vendor calls in motel lobbies across the Carolinas. Every problem became mine to solve. Every victory handed upward for someone else to claim. Thomas Avery would clap my shoulder in meetings, saying, "Lydia keeps this place standing. He liked dependable people, especially ones who didn't ask for credit. Performance reviews perfect. Client satisfaction unmatched. Bonuses steady, never generous." When Noah's acceptance letter to Clemson arrived, I thought maybe it was all worth it. Every weekend lost, every line item I triple-checked. At work, they called me the backbone of Barton, but backbones don't get promoted. They just hold the weight until something finally cracks. That morning, I didn't know it yet, but the first fracture had already begun. It started quietly, just an email from Thomas titled "New Addition to the Team." He wrote that his daughter Sienna Avery, fresh from her MBA at Emory, would be joining Barton's operations division to learn the ropes. The message was warm, full of pride, like a parent announcing a birth. I remember smiling politely at my screen, not yet realizing what those words meant. Sienna arrived the following Monday in pale heels and an immaculate white blazer, her confidence bright enough to light the hallway. She looked younger than the interns but carried herself like she'd already earned the corner office. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Ms. Harrow," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Ms. Harrow." No one had called me that in years. The formality put a quiet wall between us. But I let it stand. Thomas gave her the office beside his, a space twice the size of mine, with a view of the river and a frosted glass nameplate already waiting. "She'll shadow you for a few weeks," he said. "No one knows this department better than you do." "Of course," I answered, "because that's what you say when you've spent years being dependable." Sienna's first few days were full of questions that didn't need asking. She mixed up invoice codes, called clients by the wrong names, and once forwarded a confidential vendor report to an external mailing list. I cleaned up the mess quietly, without letting it reach Thomas's desk. She thanked me each time, cheerful, unbothered, and moved on. By her third week, people in accounting started copying her on internal updates meant for me. When I asked about it, one of them said, "Oh, Mr. Avery told us to include her on everything. She's being groomed for leadership." The word groomed lingered like an echo I didn't want to hear. I watched her through the glass wall that separated our offices, smiling on phone calls, laughing too easily with the team I'd built from the ground up. There was nothing malicious in her tone, nothing openly disrespectful. But every time she said Ms. Harrow, I felt the title press down like a reminder I was training the person who would one day take my place. It was late on a Thursday, the kind of night when the building felt hollow, just the hum of vending machines and the buzz of exit lights reflecting off glass walls. Most people had gone home hours ago, but I stayed to finish the quarterly vendor reconciliation before Friday's review. I'd done it 100 times before numbers. Quiet. No surprises. When I walked past Thomas's office, the door was half open, his voice carried into the hallway, low and deliberate. I almost kept walking until I heard my name. "Lydia's dependable," he said. "Solid as they come, but not visionary." I stopped. My hand tightened around the folder I was holding. Another voice answered, older, smoother. Edward Colson, the chairman of Barton's board. I'd only met him twice, both times shaking hands while he complimented my efficiency. "She's been running that division for years." "Thomas. Why not give her the title?" Thomas gave a small laugh, the kind people use when they think they're being reasonable. "The board wants new energy, someone younger. Sienna understands where the industry's headed. She's the future of this company." My pulse hammered in my ears. The folder slipped from my hand, scattering invoices across the carpet. I knelt to gather them, slow and silent, as if noise might make the words more real. "She'll learn fast." Thomas continued. "Lydia's great for stability, but vision comes from youth." I straightened, the papers trembling slightly in my hands. Stability. The word was meant as praise, but it felt like a gravestone. Through the narrow crack of the door, I saw him leaning back in his chair, smiling like a man closing a deal. On his desk sat the framed photo of him and Sienna at her graduation, his arm around her, both of them glowing with pride. I turned away before he could see me and walked down the empty hallway, my heels echoing on the tile. The night air outside was thick with salt and humidity, but for the first time in years, I felt cold. The job I'd built my life around had never been mine to earn. The next morning, the office smelled faintly of cinnamon and copy paper. Someone from HR had brought pastries for the special announcement. People gathered in the conference room, half curious, half pretending they didn't already know. I sat near the end of the table, hands folded, eyes on the glossy surface that still reflected last night's exhaustion. Thomas walked in with his usual confidence. Sienna following 2 steps behind in a navy suit that looked too crisp for morning. He cleared his throat and smiled, the kind of smile rehearsed for photographs. "As of today," he said, "I'm proud to introduce our new Director of Operations, Sienna Avery." Applause broke out. The sound was uneven, hesitant at first, then louder as people joined in out of politeness. I clapped too. "That's what you do when the script demands it." Sienna smiled at the team, thanking everyone, saying how excited she was to learn from such a strong foundation. Her eyes landed on me, and for a fleeting second, there was something like guilt, or maybe fear. Then it was gone. I reached into my folder, pulled out a single envelope, and placed it in front of Thomas. He glanced down, still smiling, probably assuming it was another report. Then he saw his name typed neatly in the top corner. His hand stilled. He tore it open and scanned the first lines. The color drained from his face. "You're resigning," he said, too loudly. Heads turned toward us, effective immediately. I replied. My voice was calm, even. "I'll assist with the transition through the end of the week." He blinked, searching for authority he no longer had. "Lydia, this isn't the time." "Timing," I said softly, "matters." The room went quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't just fill a space, it rearranges it. Sienna's smile faded. Someone dropped a pen. Outside the window, the morning light flared against the glass, blinding for a moment. I stood, pushed my chair in, and walked toward the door, leaving the envelope open on the table like a verdict. No one clapped this time. By the afternoon, Thomas was already in my doorway. He didn't bother knocking. His tie was loosened, his expression a mix of anger and panic. "Lydia, let's be reasonable," he said, closing the door behind him. "You've built this place. You can't just walk away now." I kept packing my desk drawers, files, pens, a small photo of Noah from his high school graduation. "I'm finishing out my notice, Thomas." "That's reasonable enough." He sighed, leaning against the frame. "Think of your responsibilities. Your son, the mortgage, your reputation. Do you really want to throw that away because you're upset?" "I'm not upset," I said, locking the top drawer. "I'm finished." He left with no answer, but his words lingered, the kind that come from someone used to winning through guilt. The first cracks appeared the next morning. Sienna showed up early, pale and frantic. Lowry Steele's threatening to cancel their order. She blurted out before she'd even set her purse down. They said something about shipping windows and penalties. I don't know what to tell them. I motioned toward the empty chair across from me. "Start by showing me the email." She pulled it up on her screen. It was a mess of forwarding chains, half-written replies, and attachments mislabeled by the vendor. I read through it once, then took a slow breath. They need confirmation of the replacement shipment. The brackets are sitting in the Jacksonville port under a mislabeled manifest. How do you even know that she asked? "Because it's always Jacksonville," I said, and started typing. For 3 hours, we worked side by side. I guided her through logistics reports, supplier codes, carrier IDs, the language I'd spent years perfecting while she was still in business school. She took notes like her life depended on it. By noon, Lowry Steele had reversed the cancellation. When we hung up, Sienna looked at me differently. The arrogance had faded, replaced by something closer to respect and fear. I gathered my things and stood. "That's one fire out," I said. "Try not to start another before Monday." "Behind me," she whispered. "I don't know how you do it." I didn't answer. "Some lessons you can't teach in 2 weeks." By midweek, the office buzzed with whispers. Everyone knew I was leaving, but no one said it aloud. The only person pretending nothing had changed was Thomas, who walked around with forced cheer, as if ignoring the cracks could keep the building from collapsing. On Thursday morning, my phone rang just after 9. The name flashing on the screen stopped me mid-step. Elena Brooks, CEO of Mariner Systems, one of Barton's biggest competitors. We'd worked together years ago on a supply chain integration project. I answered, cautious. "Lydia." she said, her voice calm, confident. I heard you're leaving Barton. Is that true? It is, I replied. I've followed your work, she continued. You're the reason Barton's Southeastern Division runs like a clock. We could use a director like you here. Full authority over operations, creative control, 30% higher pay. Interested, I sat down. The words sinking in. After years of proving myself in silence, someone finally said out loud what I'd always known. I am, I said, very interested. We discussed details for 20 minutes logistics models, salary, relocation terms. When the call ended, I sat for a moment staring out the window at the harbor, the sunlight cutting gold lines across the water. For the first time in a long while, I felt something that wasn't exhaustion. I felt seen. That afternoon, Thomas appeared in my doorway again, holding his phone like it was evidence. I just got a call from Lowry Steel. He said, "They mentioned you're talking to Mariner Systems. Are you recruiting clients while you're still on our payroll?" I met his glare, unflinching. "No, I'm taking my experience with me, not your property." He stepped closer, voice rising. "Those client relationships belong to Barton. Respect isn't proprietary," I said quietly. He froze, unsure how to answer. When he finally left, slamming the door behind him, I reopened my laptop and typed my acceptance email to Elena Brooks. My pulse was steady, my mind clear. I wasn't running anymore. I was simply walking toward something that finally felt like mine. The morning of my final week began with alarms, literal ones. The logistics board was flashing red across half the shipment tracker. Delays in Savannah, missing inventory in Jacksonville, a warehouse strike in Columbia. The kind of chaos I used to anticipate before it ever reached this stage. By the time I reached the office, the conference room was already filled. Sienna sat at the head of the table, pale and tense, with a stack of papers she didn't understand. Thomas stood beside her, his jaw tight, the picture of forced control. "Our client from Lowry Steel is threatening breach of contract penalties," he said the moment I walked in. "We need this fixed immediately." I set my bag down but didn't sit. "You have your director of operations," I said evenly. "Let her handle it." Sienna's eyes flicked toward me, pleading. Thomas's voice hardened. "This isn't a training exercise. Lydia, we need results." I met his gaze. "You said she's ready. Prove it." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Somewhere down the hall, a printer hummed, indifferent. Sienna shuffled through her notes, voice trembling as she tried to explain how she'd rerouted freight. She mixed up ports, suppliers, timelines. The client representative on speaker interrupted with a sharp tone. "If that cargo doesn't ship within 24 hours, your company will cover the entire penalty clause." Thomas slammed his hand on the table. "Lydia, step in." For the first time in 5 years, I didn't. I picked up my folder, slid the few remaining papers inside, and straightened. "This isn't my problem anymore. Don't you dare walk out," Thomas barked. "You can't just leave us like this." "I already did," I said softly. I turned toward the door as the room erupted, phones ringing. Sienna stammering, Thomas shouting over the client on speaker. I kept walking. Outside. The corridor was strangely quiet, sunlight spilling across the floor like nothing inside that room had ever mattered. I passed the glass wall of my old office one last time. My nameplate still glinted on the door, Lydia Harrow, Operations Manager. I left it there. 6 months later. Charleston's spring heat had turned the air heavy and bright again. I was sitting in my new office at Mariner Systems, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, when a trade magazine landed on my desk. Someone had left it open to a page already folded in half. The headline stretched across the top in bold black print, "Barton Logistics loses major accounts amid nepotism scandal." I read the article slowly, my coffee growing cold beside me. 4 major clients gone in 5 months. Lowry Steel, Copperline Manufacturing, Titan Freight, all names I knew by heart. The board, it said, had launched an internal investigation after leadership irregularities and family favoritism compromised regional operations. A small paragraph near the end confirmed it. Thomas Avery terminated. Sienna Avery resigned. The board promised structural reform and leadership transparency. Corporate words for a collapse that had started long before I walked out that door. I leaned back, staring at the harbor through the glass. Seagulls circled low above the docks, white against the bright sky. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. Trucks rolling along the bridge, shipments flowing toward the port. Barton's implosion was just another headline to them. To me, it was closure without bitterness. At Mariner, things felt different. Elena Brooks trusted me to build something new, an initiative for sustainable shipping logistics that cut waste and cost in half. The team here listened, argued, improved. When a project failed, we fixed it together. When it succeeded, the credit belonged to everyone. Some evenings, when the office grew quiet, I'd think about the old conference room, the echo of Thomas's voice demanding I stay. Sienna's nervous laughter filling the silence. They had wanted control. I had wanted peace. Now, I had both distance and purpose. My days were still long, but not heavy. I left work before sunset, called Noah to ask about his classes, and felt the lightness of breathing without someone waiting to take credit for it. Peace, I realized, didn't shout. It settled. It was late afternoon when I stopped at a small cafe near the Charleston harbor, the kind of place that smelled like roasted beans and sea salt. The windows were open, and the breeze carried the sound of gulls and distant ship horns. I ordered an iced coffee and sat near the back, watching the sunlight drift across the tables. That's when I saw her. Sienna Avery sat alone by the window, a logistics textbook open beside a half-empty cup. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, the sharp confidence she used to wear replaced by quiet focus. For a moment, I considered leaving before she noticed me, but then she looked up and our eyes met. She blinked in surprise, then gave a small, nervous smile. "Ms. Harrow," she said softly, standing as if unsure whether she should. "It's Lydia," I replied. "Mind if I sit?" She nodded quickly. Up close, I saw the tiredness around her eyes, the kind that doesn't come from late nights, but from growing up too fast. "I'm back in school," she said, gesturing at the book, Master's in Supply Chain Management. I figured I should actually learn what I was supposed to be doing. Her tone held no bitterness, only honesty. I smiled. "That's smart." She hesitated before speaking again. "You deserved that job. I wasn't ready. I thought I was. But..." She stopped, searching for the right words. "I just wanted him to be proud." I looked at her for a long moment, the harbor light flickering between us. "You will be ready one day," I said finally, "once you earn it." She nodded, eyes shining with something between regret and relief. When we stood to leave, she offered her hand. I took it. The gesture felt genuine, fragile, and clean of old resentment. Outside, the evening sun touched the water, scattering gold across the tide. I walked along the pier toward my car, the air warm on my face. For the first time in years, there was no weight on my shoulders, only peace. Simple and steady, like the tide itself.